Welcome to Defender Fridays, everyone. Also, just as a quick reminder, this is our last episode for calendar year 2024. So hopefully most of you are getting some well-deserved time off, and then the Lima Charlie team will kind of be reducing down to kind of a skeleton crew. So we won't have an episode for the next 2 weeks. So Bryson, thank you so much for joining us for our last episode of 2024. Super thrilled to have you. I'm sure most of our audience here probably knows who you are, but for those that don't, Bryson Bort is the CEO, the founder of Scythe, a super cool purple team platform, kind of adversarial emulation style product. And I'm sure most of you probably know Bryson because he's pretty popular on the speaker circuit at all the big conferences that most of you know and love. So Bryson, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to jump on with us today. To talk about, I want to say it was adversary emulation and how it works to inform blue teamers. Is that correct?
I mean, happy to talk about anything that anybody wants. I'm yours for half an hour. We've got Bitcoin ready for the ransom. So, whatever you want to do, Eric, I'm here.
Well, fantastic, man. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty interesting topic and a relevant one to the types of folks that hang out here. One of the things that we've gone back and forth on over the years is sort of the roles in blue teams and red teams and then the purple teams and everything in between. But something that I think you probably have a particular expertise and experience with is how, the adversary emulation piece of all of this is designed to add value to security operations.
Let's back up on some things. So, first of all, the entire point of any hacker, pen test, red teamer, purple teamer, you name any of that space of I'm here to mess up your stuff, we're quality assurance. That's our job. We are QA. You ever want to put a hacker in their place, you do QA. You're a QA tester because IT is there to establish the functionality of what we're doing. Security's job is the assurance of it. And then we're there to check that it performs to the security function. And so you summarize that security is defined by the threat. It's the one piece of somebody else gets a vote on what that is. And that's why we all have the existential angst of, did we do enough? Did we miss something? Is there a misconfiguration? Are we going to do everything right? And then some user does something and it's all undone. And that's what makes it so complicated. This is the one discipline in the world where we can't quantify it. Security is a guess. It is. It's a guess. Everything we do all day long is a guess. And it leads to that anxiety that we have. And the reason for that is because the overall attack space is infinite. Because it isn't just a technical problem, right? I mentioned users. Users are the largest part of the risk surface area. And by all means, I'm not meaning blame the user or pick on the user. They are using the computer the way it was designed to make money. That's it. That's how they're using it. Our job is to work around them and support them and let them do either dumb things or not dumb things and unwitting things that doesn't burn the enterprise down, right? If a user can click on a fish and your enterprise goes down, that's us. That's not them.
Oh, geez.
There's
a hot topic right there, man. Users, fish simulations and their effectiveness.
Oh, I hate them. I hate phishing simulation. I think it's useless. I mean, let's put ourselves in this, right? You all have to do mandatory annual HR training, right? How do you feel about that? The users feel the same way about the security training we're doing. And then phishing training, what else is that doing other than at best annoying users or pissing them off and continuing to contribute to the adversarial relationship that we have inside our company? We're not even talking about the real adversary. We're just talking about where we're annoying the shit out of people and not actually getting something more beneficial. Because at the end of the day, you're never going to get clicks to zero. It's never going to happen. Never, ever, ever, ever. So why are we spending money on it? Sorry, you got me on that rant.
No. And while you were ranting, I'm digging up a resource. A tab I had open yesterday where anecdotal evidence was published. It kind of combined years of studying the effectiveness of phish training. Basically, it's largely ineffective. And in some cases, actually, they found that organizations with somewhat aggressive like phish training setups learned that they were seeing increased click-through rates of users that had taken certain types of training or were subjected to certain types of simulations. So it's like, it may actually be working backwards in some cases. But anyway, yeah, that's a whole nother soapbox rant, man. We don't have to go all the way down that. I think a lot of folks on this call probably would agree with the sentiment that it's not the most effective thing. But Bryson, what I'm curious to hear your thoughts on is, so take your typical red team, your pen test team, and let's talk about them in terms of like those that are embedded within an organization, because some larger organizations have the luxury of having dedicated, red teams that.
And I like you phrased it that way, Eric, the luxury of a red team.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Right. Well, depending on how you look at it, right? But I also, in my experience, I've seen, sometimes these teams are very siloed. They're very elitist, and it's almost like a competition on just stump the chump. Like we just want to kind of rub it in your face that we were able to get by your defenses, get by your controls, and look how quickly we got to dominate it. But I mean, where do you see adversary emulation truly serving its intended purpose of informing defenders? Like, how should this work?
Yeah, so let's break down several things. That's why I was really highlighting where you said the luxury of a red team. Very few organizations have a red team.
Right.
We are talking the creme de la creme to afford a red team. And even then, the red teams aren't well resourced. And I'll explain that because this all goes back to economics. And so I call it the line. Every organization everywhere has the line. The budget of the company starts with what's our mission, which in a commercial company is profit. That's where we spend most of our money. That's operations. And then the line goes down, and the slope of the line can change, but the line then goes to IT, which is in our direction, right? So X percentage of that budget goes for IT, and that's usually about 5 to 10%. We're not even the blue team yet. We're not even a security operations, right? We're already at 5 or 10% of company budget is IT. Now, blue team is 5 to 10% of that. And then if there's anything, and now anything is red team and niche and grab bag, that's 5 to 10% of that. So you can just plot that line and figure out where a company has to have a certain amount of revenue to even get to the luxury of a red team, which is why what I preach is you don't need a red team. You need red capability. You need the ability for blue or IT or wherever you are on that line to be able to drive the security use case testing that you need for what you're doing. So it is a luxury to have a red team. You don't need one to be able to do this stuff, which is why I just gave a 3-hour tech talk this week where it was all around, let me show you what you can do with PowerShell, because everyone thinks even people who are practitioners think they know PowerShell. There is so much more there that you don't even think about. And I accidentally stumbled upon a novel a novel persistence mechanism that I never described anywhere else with PowerShell, right?
100%.
Everyone again, even in this world, we think we know that. So back to this, what I recommend is establish a red capability, because blue needs some sort of check. And it doesn't need to be a big exercise. It doesn't need to be the annual pen test, because you don't need any more goddamn reports, right? You need help. And it needs to be more right there when you need it before it goes into operations or as a part of that. And so what I try to recommend is, where can we find, just like we have in DevOps, we have test scripts before we do this, where can we give blue the same kind of thing to use on a day-to-day basis as a part of what they're doing? Nothing complicated, not some crazy hacker tool. This is one of the reasons I really like Red Canary's Atomic Red Team, because that's an easy way to script and automate that stuff. And there's, again, PowerShell. I like PowerShell because anybody in IT knows PowerShell. So you have the ability to get that advice and that help to bring those things in. And again, just have some PowerShell scripts, validate that before you push things or test things.
100%.
And
I'm curious.
Then grow to the adversary emulation, right? Now let's try to bring in like real threat emulation of what we're doing. And let's be honest, most places don't really do that. So where I first became, in quote, famous was I took the entire red team industry to task, because what I found were a bunch of nerds who were pursuing novel technical things at the expense of everybody else. And then they were condescending about it, and they would gloat about it, and they'd be like, look how smart we are. Blue team's so dumb. And I was like, what the is your problem? Seriously, that was an entire industry. That's the way we were 7 years ago. And it's wrong. If you aren't helping make blue and IT and the core operations better and easier and making their lives better, what are you doing? Get out of the way.
1000%, man. 100% with you on that. So yeah, and that's kind of where I was going with the question, or at least kind of, slowly introducing my thoughts on the topic, is that any red team that exists to serve itself should not exist, right? Like it's not the game of like, look how we were able to pwn you with this thing here. And the biggest disconnect that I see there are red teams that are not communicating strongly, effectively with their blue counterparts, and basically in a continuous improvement loop, right? Like the blue team is the core necessity of the organization. The red team is the luxury, as we kind of, agreed upon. And so, the red team should be consistently justifying its reason to exist. But I really like where you took it, though, that really the desired state might not even be to have a red team. It's to have red capabilities within your defense team. And let me ask you this. Would you consider this a baby step into that direction? Say I'm a blue team, I've got maybe one or two, detection engineers, and all they do is sit around writing new detection capabilities. And we don't really want to get into like adversary emulation. That's tough. But what if we got a little bit more sophisticated in our detection engineering, where we're adding like rule tests to our workflow, right? So when we craft a new rule, it goes through a series of tests against maybe manufactured telemetry or data, right? That's not quite adversary emulation. It's not running Minikats on the endpoint and seeing did the rule fire. But if I can kind of manufacture the telemetry of Minikats being run and then test my rule against it sort of artificially, is that a step in the direction, or are these kind of separate, you think?
So what I was just looking up is we posted a blog talking about the maturity aspect of it, and I think detection engineering is another. So I did an interview with Tim Malcolm-Vetter. So for those of you who don't know Tim ran Red Team at Walmart. Then
we've had Tim on Defender Fridays, yeah.
Yeah, and Tim basically was talking about the luxury of detection engineering, because detection engineering is kind of the end goal of all of these things coming together. So it's like, I'm not even debating, did I get red right? I'm now going, I've got red and blue right. Now how am I doing detection engineering? So it's even more niche and even harder to do. And so how do I do that effectively as a company with and I really struggle as an expert with this, because I mean, this goes back to Wendy Nather in 13, where she talked about the haves and the have-nots. And that's so much of where most of the conversations we as practitioners have are all for the haves. Nobody's there helping the have-nots. None of this stuff helps the have-nots at all. So I don't know if I answered your question there.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. You at least gave me a different perspective, that even the assumption of detection engineering being at that stage kind of assumes a certain level of maturity where more is possible. Yeah, for sure.
This is why CrowdStrike is so popular.
That makes really good sense. Yeah,
because they're giving me the Best Buy Apple version of detection engineering.
Right.
Is it work for me? No, not really. Can I do anything custom with it? Not at all. But is it the best? I mean, again, perfection is the enemy of progress. CrowdStrike proved that as the largest cybersecurity company on the planet. People just want good enough.
Preach, man. Preach. Indeed. So Bryson, so I double checked your actual topic that you kind of set forward was responsible. I think it was responsible offense for defenders. So are we circling the drain on that, or do you have a spin out on that particular focus that you've got thoughts about?
No, it was just a general conversation here. So, I mean, the responsible part, again, goes back to, like I said, where I think I first rose to public prominence with taking the red teamers to task. And the pushback was pretty strong back then. So it's nice that I was proven right years later, but at the time it was not well received. I mean, nobody likes to hear they're not doing their job well, and that's what I said all of them were doing. But again, as you phrased it, you can't operate other than constantly justifying value. But let's talk about why that's hard, right? So responsible offense is exactly as you described it, Eric. I'm producing a value, and value means things get better. So the first problem is most red teams, whether they're internal or external, the way it's designed, do something clever. That's why we're bringing human red team operators into it, because we want the thinking part of it. And I'm phrasing that on purpose. And then produce a poorly written report and disappear. Let's say the report isn't even poorly written, which, is really hard for nerds to write in plain English about technical concepts. But let's say that's even the case. Now you're a blue teamer and you get this report. I think I understand it, right? I think I understand what you did. How do I technically replicate that? I mean, I don't have your tools. If I do have the tools, I mean, I'm not like, it takes a while to master like a Cobalt Strike. Like How am I supposed to replicate that to make sure I actually fixed the thing? Where are you? And you're gone, right? Poof, you just threw a report at me, which is why I think purple teaming is so valuable. So my recommendation of tying all this stuff in is, establishing as much as possible simple red capabilities, try to tie those into operational test script approach like you would anywhere else in QA and development. Start to grow that with, again, purple being the start, because you build, again, it isn't even just technical. You're building relationships. You're building trust. We forget, again, the human element. I mean, these are people who are practitioners who need to work together. And so if I can plan that with you, execute with you, and fix that with you, well, now I'm with you, right? We're doing this together. It's not me throwing stuff at your head and be like, I figured you didn't have enough work. Do you want some more? And by the way, do it on your own. Like, I'm a part of that with you. I'm in the trenches with you. That's responsible offense. That's what we need to be doing. And that's why purple teaming is such a great approach. However, purple teaming has limitations. So the reason I specifically phrase like human imagination of the red teamer, that's the goal. Let's get where you trust me enough as a responsible red teamer, and I know my environment well enough that you're not just popping the first box and owning domain and walking away, because that's not valuable. We don't need to run a test to learn that, right?
Right.
I should grow in my confidence as a team that we then go, you know what? Now I want to see you try. Now I want to see the edges. And I know that we've got here together. So you're going to be as surprised as I am that those edges are there. And then let's fix them together. That's the maturity model that I recommend that companies should go through. And that's how we build trusted relationships with red and blue and IT. And it is responsible offense.
Phenomenal answer, man. I love that. That's super kind of just thorough on breaking that down. I'm curious then, Bryson, what are your thoughts on sort of the maturity thresholds for an organization that's kind of building up, and aiming for that desired end state, but like, what is the threshold before, purple team or red team, whether it's internal or external, even makes sense? Because like, I remember, in my days consulting, too often it's the first thing that they think that they need is a pen test, but you look inside and it's in shambles, right? So it's like, you could pay for that pen test. You can get that nerd to come in and write that crappy report and show you the one thing that they use to get domain admin, but there's hundreds of other things that are broken. So like, I don't know, where do you think in this sort of maturity life cycle it makes sense to even start thinking about it this way?
Well, so yeah, I get this in a different way, because folks are kind of like, I want to grow to the point where I've then built the confidence to then do the test.
Yeah.
And again, this is why I keep going back to DevOps and QA. Stop getting so focused on the security piece. It's the same principles. Why would I wait to the end of a project to test that I did the project right? That makes no sense. Security testing should be scaffolding that helps us validate design and validates the development and validates the change as we're doing it. So we need to get out of this. Like, again, the annual pen test was good. The way that compliance is good is that we have a foundational education, communication, and understanding with the world. This is why I call ransomware a kitchen word. Everybody knows ransomware. In fact, you all want to laugh at this. That means when I say kitchen word, I mean your grandmother knows what ransomware is. Well, guess what? Executives are like your grandmother. The level of knowledge and awareness, treat them like your grandmother. What she knows, they know. That's your average executive. If we in the security world would talk differently to grandma, that's how we should talk to our execs. That's their level of knowledge. So I forgot my train of thought. I'm grandmother. I got grandmother memory.
Well, you were starting off on ransomware, and that's what sent us on the grandmother analogy. But you took us all down that path with you, man. We're gone.
Yeah, and I don't know where I started before I got down the tangent. Talk to your execs like grandmother. There's your big takeaway.
Got it. Oh man, yeah. I think I had a train of thought brewing too, and then we went down your side road, and I lost mine and went down yours and lost yours too. We're dropping.
I apologize for being so damn good looking and engaging. What can I say? It's a curse. If only I could remember where I was at.
All good, man. I think we're all in like pre-holiday phase, so I don't blame you, man. Hey, I want to pause for a second here because we try to foster a very sort of fireside chat, energy in these talks. So I want to make sure if anybody here has got thoughts, questions, contributions, you want to ask Bryson something, please speak up, throw something in chat. I've been trying to keep up. There's been a lot of chatter, but yeah, if I missed anything, you guys, feel free to jump on.
Corey has a question here with regards to creating and growing a purple team, how difficult it is pulling from a talent pool of folks who know blue and red to be effective. So first step, of course, is even getting the buy-in to the idea. I mean, we talked about it in a lot of different aspects where people have their experiences and they are, they're opposed to this kind of testing to begin with for different reasons. I mean, there's ego in it on both sides. There's the lack of the tooling. Oh my gosh, I need this or I need that. I need a red team. Again, that's why when we take the team out and its capability, again, team brings human imagination. That's great, but capability is what the baseline that we need. So how do I pull all that together to then go what I'm doing? And the process itself is its own maturity, right? A purple team process is its own maturity. In fact, I'm going to quick post that in. So we worked with a bunch of folks throughout the community to create the purple team exercise framework. So it's a free guide. It's on GitHub. And this talks through all the elements of the process in a free book that we've iterated over the years with a bunch of people. So following this process helps with the planning and just the execution of it. So that's part of it too. And the reason I'm mentioning the process, because to answer the question, if you have the basics of I got some stuff and I can find some stuff, and then I can go Google Stack Overflow on what I don't know of how to fix some of the stuff, and I've got a process to repeat that, congrats. You're now training yourself on the job. And that's how you get past the, I don't even know where to start part, which is why I spend so much time on the, just lowering the barrier to understanding offense for folks, because that's the hardest part. Most people are intimidated by where to start.
100%, man. And I got to say, I can speak from experience when I say that I do think that more defenders should spend time understanding offensive concepts, tools, and things like that, because it only makes you better at what you do, right? I'm not saying go off and be a pen tester. I'm just saying that, hey, there are so many awesome C2 frameworks that are totally free. You can download it, fire it up in your home lab, practice with what's it feel like to deploy C2 implant and then to run C2 commands and to see what a pure in-memory variant of PowerShell looks like from a telemetry perspective. It's just a fantastic skill set, I think, to kind of hone, and it makes you a better defender. But Bryson, actually,
and I have a resource for that I just posted in chat. So me, George Urchias, and Adam Ashinchi from 19 DerbyCon came up with a community idea of let's evaluate all of the C2s that are available. There's now 140 of them, free ones, paid ones. We include a wizard there because you're kind of like, well, I want to do this kind of test. What even does that? And then we did a collaboration with SANS Institute to create a Kali distro that it has built-in installs of blue and red tools. So, because again, free stuff has terrible documentation, and even try to install stuff could sometimes be a pain. So we solved all that for you. So again, lowering the barrier to entry. There's another free tool that we did.
Dropping bombs, man. Epic. I love that. I'm definitely going to spend some time with that because I actually have some questions myself about some of the various frameworks, and I'd like to compare and contrast them. That's super cool. But
no, this is not Kali Purple. This is it's called SAM Slingshot.
Yeah, I see that question. So train of thought came back from your original chat just a second ago before we went off talking about grandma and executives. It was, you were talking about the scaffolding or how security should be sort of part of a continuous and ongoing process, the scaffolding, right, around our initiatives and efforts versus do a year-long project and then test and assessment. And it was just an analogy that came to mind that it feels similar, right? It's like thinking that you can just kind of live however you want to live as long as you're getting your annual checkup, right? But you go in, your doctor tells you every year, hey, you're doing worse than you were last year. Oh, you're doing worse still. Versus taking a more holistic approach and doing all the things that contribute to a healthy lifestyle all the time, right? And it's a lame analogy, but I'm using it because it just makes sense that what you're saying is and should be true, that relying on a pen test to come in and show you your problems is probably, you're always going to be behind the curve versus building it into a daily and integral part of project development, daily operations. I just wanted to come back to that because that was a really great point you were making, even though you and I both somehow lost it in the moment.
Yes, that was a great point that I made earlier.
Somebody else made a comment a moment ago. I'm trying to find it, but they were talking about, yeah, Justin brought it up that, yeah, I think a universal issue that teams encounter is knowledge silos, right? Or folks that are keeping knowledge, hoarding knowledge, and that kind of thing. And one of the approaches that I like to take there is you make documentation just kind of a cultural sort of way of life for
yeah, no one's ever going to do that. That's one of those things that people put in a textbook and they're like, thou shalt, you should document. Nobody ever does it. No one's ever going to do it. That's never going to change. I'm sorry. That's human psychology.
That's because they haven't found Notion yet, though, Bryson. I don't know if you're a fan of Notion.
Educate me. What does Notion do?
Well, Notion, once you really get under the hood of Notion, I think that the capabilities it almost can make documentation exciting again. As weird as that sounds, you just got to try it. But I'm like a Notion junkie, so I document everything that goes through my head ends up in my Notion, and that's both for personal stuff and for work stuff. And so I think part of the problem is removing the friction from documentation, because that has so much, I think, to do with it. If I've got to go into a SharePoint or some ridiculous knowledge-based portal or whatever, yeah, you're right, I don't want to mess with it. But if it's easy, if it's already part of my workflow and a tool that I find useful and interesting, I don't know, might be able to get it done. But yeah, you're right, documentation is a tough problem. And matter of fact, Whitney made a sticker once to immortalize a quote that I said that will haunt me forever: documentation is for scrubs. And so every time I get on my documentation soapbox, she likes to remind me that I once said documentation is for scrubs.
Yeah, but I mean, again, this is where it's, even if the documentation is there or not there, how it's employed in the environment, understanding the way tools really work. This is another thing I've seen a lot of challenge, because, and it's not, I'm not knocking salespeople, because a lot of people go immediately to, well, we got sold a bill of goods. No, it's understanding exactly how the tool does what it does. A great example of that was a Purple Team. We did Purple Team ransomware on a client, and they were paying 7 digits for, one of the names you all know, not one that I've mentioned. And they were like, we know it's anti-ransomware. We're like, okay, let's see. And we showed exactly, and it worked like there was no problem. The ransomware worked like there was no problem. They were like, wait, what? And they were all mad at the sales folks. We're like, well, no. So the problem is you have a canary token on a file. And if we don't touch that file, that's like how it works. So again, it's not that the tool wasn't designed properly. It was just understanding that nuance is the key part.
Assumptions were made. Yeah. And I did a similar assessment some years back where a customer was ultra confident they had bought this fancy DLP solution, deployed it everywhere, and DLP is no longer a problem.
I know you've seen DLP really work.
No, it doesn't. But I think even this particular customer was completely beside himself at how ineffective the solution was. Like, we ran a battery of tests, like 20 different tests of moving data, and not even in covert and sneaky ways. Copy, paste into website, or upload it in clear text to an S3 bucket. And their minds were blown. And it all just came back to, you can't just deploy the control and assume everything is good. If you, one, don't understand the control and its limitations, and two, don't at least periodically test that thing is doing the thing you think it's doing. Yeah,
exactly. Validate your assumptions. And then the other pithy quote I have: security is a constant fight against gravity. Whatever you've put in place, I mean, the business is going to keep changing, users are going to keep changing, assets keep changing, configuring, everything keeps changing. So the bit rot you see in old software is the same thing you have in your environment, which is why the continuous part becomes necessary, because whatever you've earned is going to degrade over time.
Man, I'm stealing that quote, Bryson. That's a solid analogy there, and I really dig it. Well, man, that brings us to the top of the hour, Bryson. Time flies. So thank you so much for joining us, man. This has been a super fun conversation. Everybody, quick reminder again, this is our last show for 2024. So we are taking the next 2 weeks off. I hope you all get some time off as well. But come back and join us in 2025. We'll be right back here, same time, same place. Have a fantastic holiday season for all those that participate. And we'll see you all next year. Thanks again, Bryson.
Thanks for having me on.